It also says African struggles against colonialism, apartheid, imperialism, neo-colonialism and new forms of socio-economic and political dispossessions of the African people are and will always be interconnected. But for more on the story in our studios, we are now joined by Philani Ndebele, the campaigns manager from Action Support Center. Philani, thank you so much for your time. Welcome to AM News.
Okay, thank you for hosting us.
Now, before we get into the xenophobic attacks that have been occurring, both in KZN and in Gauteng, would you tell me more about your organization?
Okay, the Action Support Center, based here in Auckland Park as well. We are a network of individuals and organizations that are committed to positive action to transform conflict. And most of the initiatives that we are doing are directed by three fundamental pillars. That is the Solidarity and Transformation Agenda that aims at building and deepening a culture of pan-African people-to-people solidarity. We have the Skills and Strategies for Change that focuses mainly on building capacity of activists at grassroots level. We also have the Bridging Gaps and Forging Partnerships that focuses on building relationships at all levels from grassroots, linking them to different government structures, even at SADC level and even at AU level.
And just hearing, giving us a scope of the organization, it's clear then that you are against xenophobia and its, attacks. Well, of course, they started back in 2008 and now, we're seeing them back again in 2015. But what is your take on the root cause of xenophobia in South Africa?
I think to begin with, we're missing a healthy, bigger picture perspective analysis. That's the first thing that we're missing at the moment. And the other biggest challenge is that we call it xenophobia, Afrophobia, Negrophobia, or any other term that we want to call it, so that we see it as an issue or as an experience that has no history and that has no context. And I think that is absolutely wrong. And what we're experiencing at the moment is actually an outburst of ongoing bitterness from the ground. It's a challenge of a system that feeds on the chaos at the bottom. And until we address that system, we'll not be able to transform our communities. And in many instances, we narrow the causes to lack of jobs and any other issues. But there are very fundamental issues that we need to begin to address. And these particular incidents, they offer us an opportunity to begin to engage with some of those issues. Why do we call each other foreigners in African? Absolutely, there's no one who is a foreigner in African land. There's no one who is a migrant, for example, in an African world. And some of these terms that we're using that were imposed as a result of the painful history of colonialism that we experience. So we need to begin to challenge the narrative and the discourse that we're using currently for us to be able to move forward.
How are you as an organization then challenging this discourse? How are you as an organization then challenging, these xenophobic attacks in Africa so that we educate, not only South Africans, but Africans at large, to live in harmony with each other?
There are quite a lot of initiatives that we have been doing. And I think one of those things was the idea of reviving the local peace committees in different communities. We have established various local peace committees in Orange Farm, in some parts of Soweto, and even in Alexandra, where there is currently xenophobic attacks. And we believe that they play a huge fundamental role, for example, in driving what we call problem-solving cultural dialogues that aim at identifying and developing innovative, non-violent forms of advocacy that draws the attention to the needs of the communities. And not only that, we've been speaking of a pan-African centered education curriculum that focuses on equipping our young people of the history of the African countries, the history of our struggles, our current struggles, and including our future struggles. Where do we find each other? What are the interconnections that exist within us? The idea of Ubuntu, how do we express it? And when we're speaking of people-to-people solidarity, what is it that we can exercise beyond the narrative that, for example, many Africans played a huge significant role towards supporting the South African liberation struggle. I think we need to move beyond that, that we're treating each other well just because we're human beings.
And Philani, there's also fear that the xenophobic attacks might just destabilize the SADC region. We've also been reporting that just in Mozambique, South Africans, or rather a handful of South Africans, have been coming back home because they fear that there might be, reprisal attacks in Mozambique. How dangerous is this, or these attacks, in as far as destabilizing, the SADC region in Africa?
Of course, the damage has been done. And we believe that in as much as we're focusing on short-term type of strategies in responding and stopping the violence and so forth, we need to sit down and reflect on this and begin a process of developing long-term strategies. And I believe one particular thing that must be corrected is that the character of the post-1994 South African state does not welcome other African people. I think that narrative must be corrected. We all Africans, and this is the space that we should share, all of us as Africans. And of course, repairing the image that has been damaged will take a long time. But I think it's imperative, us as Africans, to begin to be releasing positive messages that counter what has already been done. And we also need media that are pan-African centered, that promote our African history, the goodness of us as Africans. I think that's the beginning of everything.
It seems that the word Ubuntu, seems to come back and reiterate itself. We've heard it from the Deputy President when he addressed the UN heads of missions. We heard it from the, Minister of the Department of International Relations and Corporations talking about the spirit of Ubuntu when addressing xenophobia. But you also, as an organization, have reiterated the importance of Ubuntu in this instance. How vital is that practice at this present moment?
We cannot overemphasize on the importance of the spirit of Ubuntu in an African context, and in particular in a situation where we find ourselves in. But what we need to emphasize on is, in particular, action around Ubuntu. We cannot keep on saying Ubuntu, 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 and all those things. But we need to begin to practice that spirit of Ubuntu. And I believe it is the only spirit that binds us as Africans. And for your own information, Africa is first language, and the word Ubuntu is all African language. In Swahili, you find the word Ubuntu. In any other language you find the word Ubuntu. So I think we must begin to emphasize on action around Ubuntu, because it defines us. It defines who we are as Africans.
When I did my link in my opening, you also reiterated that the African struggle goes back to the days of apartheid. It goes back to the struggles of, colonialism. And it seems that this is just not, South Africans frustrated with their socio-economic, stances at the moment, and them trying to fight, on the ground with other foreign nationals. But it seems to also be a mentality, seems to be a mindset, of, a fellow African hating another fellow African, fighting and attacking to a point of, killing another fellow African. How do you think we'll be able to achieve, or come to a stage whereby Africans do not have that mentality anymore, do not have that mindset of actually hating each other?
I think that debate, it's broad and it's very important. And what we need to understand is that we were colonized in many forms, physically, politically, economically, and even socially and culturally. So we need to free ourselves from the mental bondage that has been imposed for us for so many years, to begin to think that a certain color is of less value, or a certain color is associated with violence or any other forms of things that we don't appreciate in communities. So until that fundamental transformation starts at the self as an individual, then we'll not move forward. But I think we should continue to share the positive messages. And one of the things that is quite disturbing is that the chairperson of the African Union, she's South African, and they're driving the Pan-African agenda. The Agenda 2063 has been issued out as a developmental path for Africa. And there's a strong emphasis on African unity and all those things. So this must trickle down to people on the ground so that we speak the same language of unity. We actually get rid of some of the terminologies that we use, foreigners, magweregweres, and all those things. They should be deleted actually in our vocabulary. And also that speaks to different government departments, how they perpetuate, how they buttress some of these terms, the Department of Home Affairs, how they classify people and all those things, and how they treat people.
Yeah.
And what is also fundamental is that we address the issue of xenophobic attitudes, because we're seeing violence at the moment. It's as a result of the attitudes that have been ongoing for a long time. And until we address the attitudes and we capture them well, we won't be able to address the issues of violence. I believe there are a lot of things that we need to address moving forward.
Philani Ndebele, of course, the Campaigns Manager of Action Support Center. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you, Paul.